Human history is replete with moments of danger and salvation, but few instances have come so close to bringing about the end of civilization as we know it. From political brinkmanship to technological failure, the 20th century bore witness to several events where the world teetered on the edge of destruction. Among these, three stand out for their terrifying immediacy and their potential global consequences: the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962, the 1983 Soviet false alarm incident, and the 1986 Chernobyl nuclear disaster. Each of these events, though unique in nature, reflects the perils of the nuclear age and the fragile line between survival and annihilation. This essay will examine these critical moments in detail, how they unfolded, how humanity responded, and what lessons they continue to teach us about power, error, and responsibility. The Cuban Missile Crisis, 1962. 13 days that shook the world. In October 1962, the world came perilously close to nuclear war during a tense political standoff between the United States and the Soviet Union. Known as the Cuban Missile Crisis, this confrontation was sparked by the discovery that the Soviet Union was installing nuclear missiles in Cuba, just 90 miles off the coast of Florida. At the height of the Cold War, this act was perceived by the United States as a direct and intolerable threat. The seeds of the crisis were sown years earlier with the failed US-backed Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961 and the deployment of American Jupiter missiles in Turkey. In response, Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev aimed to equalize the strategic imbalance by placing medium-range ballistic missiles in Cuba, ostensibly to defend the island nation against future US aggression. On October 14, 1962, American U-2 spy planes captured photographic evidence of missile installations under construction in Cuba. President John F. Kennedy and his advisors convened in what became the Executive Committee of the National Security Council, ExComm, to deliberate the American response. The options ranged from diplomatic pressure to a full-scale invasion of Cuba. Eventually, the U.S. chose a naval quarantine to prevent further Soviet missiles from arriving and demanded the removal of the existing ones. What followed was 13 days of intense negotiations, secret backchannels, and terrifying brinkmanship. Tensions peaked when a U-2 plane was shot down over Cuba, and the U.S. military prepared for possible invasion. Behind the scenes, however, diplomacy continued. A critical turning point came when Khrushchev sent two messages, one conciliatory and the other more combative. Kennedy publicly responded to the softer message, agreeing to a non-invasion pledge if the missile. On October 14, 1962, American U-2 spy planes captured photographic evidence of missile installations under construction in Cuba. President John F. Kennedy and his advisors convened in what became the Executive Committee of the National Security Council, ExComm, to deliberate the American response. The options ranged from diplomatic pressure to a full-scale invasion of Cuba. Eventually, the U.S. chose a naval quarantine to prevent further Soviet missiles from arriving and demanded the removal of the existing ones. What followed was 13 days of intense negotiations, secret backchannels, and terrifying brinkmanship. Tensions peaked when a U-2 plane was shot down over Cuba, and the U.S. military prepared for possible invasion. Behind the scenes, however, diplomacy continued. A critical turning point came when Khrushchev sent two messages, one conciliatory and the other more combative. Kennedy publicly responded to the softer message, agreeing to a non-invasion pledge if the missile. The 1983 Soviet false alarm incident, the man who saved the world. 21 years after the Cuban Missile Crisis, the world again came to the brink of nuclear disaster, not due to political escalation, but because of a technological error and the courage of one man. On September 26, 1983, Stanislav Petrov, a Soviet lieutenant colonel, was on duty at the Serpukhov 15 bunker, monitoring the Soviet Union's early warning satellite system. Suddenly, alarms went off, indicating that the United States had launched 5 intercontinental ballistic missiles toward the Soviet Union. Protocol dictated that Petrov report the launch, which would have triggered a retaliatory nuclear strike. However, something didn't feel right to him. The system showed only a few missiles, not the full-scale barrage that a real first strike would entail. Trusting his instincts and reasoning rather than the computer, Petrov classified the alert as a false alarm and chose not to escalate the incident. His gamble proved correct. It was later revealed that the system had misinterpreted the sun's reflection off high-altitude clouds as incoming missiles. Petrov's refusal to follow protocol may have prevented a nuclear holocaust, potentially killing hundreds of millions and altering the course of history. What makes the 1983 incident particularly chilling is the context in which it occurred. Just 3 weeks earlier, the Soviet Union had shot down Korean Airlines Flight 007, killing 269 civilians, including an American congressman. The US and Soviet Union were at high alert, and the Reagan administration had launched military exercises that the Soviets feared were cover for a real attack. Petrov's story remained classified until the 1990s, and he received no formal recognition from the Soviet government. However, historians and humanitarians have since honored him as the man who saved the world. The 1983 incident serves as a haunting reminder of how close the world came to nuke. The Chernobyl disaster, 1986, an invisible apocalypse. On April 26, 1986, the worst nuclear accident in human history occurred at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in the Soviet Union, near the city of Pripyat in present-day Ukraine. The disaster was triggered during a late-night safety test in Reactor 4, where operators simulated a power outage to ensure the reactor could safely shut down. A combination of design flaws and operator error led to an uncontrollable chain reaction, resulting in a massive explosion and fire that released enormous amounts of radioactive material into the atmosphere. The initial explosion killed 2 workers instantly, and over the following weeks, 29 more died from acute radiation sickness. However, the real toll was far greater. Radiation clouds spread across Europe, and countless others suffered from long-term health effects, including thyroid cancer, birth defects, and psychological trauma. The exclusion zone around the plant remains one of the most. The Chernobyl disaster was not just a technical failure. It was also a moral and political one. Soviet authorities initially downplayed the severity of the incident, failing to evacuate nearby residents for more than 36 hours. When they finally acknowledged the disaster, it was under international pressure after radiation was detected in Sweden. The catastrophe forced the world to confront the true dangers of nuclear energy and the costs of bureaucratic secrecy and authoritarian control. It also dealt a severe blow to public trust in the Soviet government and played a significant role in hastening the fall of the USSR just 5 years later. In the years since, Chernobyl has become a symbol of human fallibility, of environmental vulnerability, and of the need for global cooperation in matters of science and safety. Despite the horror, it spurred international reforms in nuclear safety protocols, including the creation of the World Association of Nuclear Operators, WANO, and ENHANCE. Themes and lingering lessons. Each of these 3 events, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the 1983 false alarm, and the Chernobyl disaster originated from different causes: geopolitical rivalry, human judgment, and technological failure. Yet they are united by common themes: the dangers of nuclear power, whether military or civilian, the fallibility of human decision-making, and the razor-thin margin between peace and catastrophe. Nuclear weapons and deterrence. The Cuban Missile Crisis and the Soviet false alarm incident both highlight the precariousness of nuclear deterrence theory. While mutual assured destruction, MAD, theoretically prevents war, it also makes human civilization hostage to mistakes, miscalculations, and mechanical malfunctions. Human error and heroism. In each case, individual actions made a difference. Kennedy's restraint, Khrushchev's diplomacy, and Petrov's skepticism of machine intelligence all contributed to humanity's survival. Conversely, in Chernobyl, the lack of proper training and safety culture resulted in catastrophe. The cost of secrecy. One of the most tragic aspects of both Chernobyl and the 1983 incident is the lack of transparency. In both cases, fear of embarrassment and political ideology suppressed truth, risking greater disaster. Transparency and international cooperation are essential safeguards in a world of shared risks. Systemic fragility. These events show how complex systems, whether political or technological, are vulnerable to collapse. Modern civilization depends on vast networks of interdependent systems, and even small failures can cascade into global crises. Conclusion. The day the world almost ended is not a single date etched in the calendar of doom, but a series of terrifying junctures in modern history when humanity stood on the edge of oblivion. Whether through miscommunication during the Cuban Missile Crisis, computer error in 1983, or scientific negligence in Chernobyl, each of these moments exposed our vulnerabilities and the existential risks we face. And yet, in each of these crises, humanity found a way to step back from the brink, sometimes through diplomacy, sometimes through individual courage, and sometimes through sheer luck. These stories are more than historical curiosities. They are warnings. In an age where nuclear weapons remain, climate change looms, and artificial intelligence introduces new uncertainties, the lessons of the past are more urgent than ever. Our future depends on our ability to remember these close calls and to act with greater foresight, responsibility, and cooperation. The world did not end on those days, but it could have. Let us ensure that we never again come so close to the edge.